For my review, I wanted to cover the success of co-teaching among students with disabilities. So I set out to answer the question, does co-teaching have a positive effect on the success of students with special needs? And success can be defined in many ways, but for the most part, our state and federal governments measure success as far as standardized test scores. However, I tried with the studies that were out there, I wasn't always just able to pick studies that included test scores. I did have to go outside that realm a little bit. In one study, it measured some students' reading increases, and it put them into different settings as far as inclusion only, combined services only, and pull-out only. And it ended up being the combined services model that was successful in that study. And the combined services was not just co-teaching. These students were co-taught and were pulled out for resource. So, there it does not, co-teaching alone does not help with the success of students with disabilities. Another study, 2 classes, a 4th grade and 5th grade class, were put into co-taught classes, meaning that there was a special ed teacher and a general education teacher in there with students with disabilities and students that did not have disabilities. Overall, there was good student achievement. This was again measured with pre and post test as far as reading gains. However, even though the students with disabilities had significant gains, there wasn't anything to compare it to. There was no control group. There's no way to know whether these students would have done just as well in a resource room or just as well in a general education room without a special education teacher. Another study that I looked at was Morowski, and he did a study of high school students in English classes with co-teaching. He did have control groups in this one. Had actually four different groups, and in the end, the student achievement among those groups, there was not a significant change from their pre-test to their post-test in any of the groups. So therefore, the study once again doesn't support that co-teaching is the best way for success among students with disabilities. He even pointed out his own deficiencies in this study, which I included in my paper. It could have been longer, more groups in different schools. Teaching styles can have an effect, which Slavin points out in his book, The Teacher Effect. And Morowski, along with Swanson, did a meta-analysis of co-teaching, and out of 37 studies they considered, only 6 were able to be used. Therein in itself is kind of a clear indicator that there's not enough research out there on the success of co-teaching. However, they found a mean effect size of 0.4, meaning that co-teaching has a moderate effect on student outcomes. But the authors themselves point out that this interpretation, you have to be cautious in the interpretation of the results because of the lack of sufficient research. Now, I also looked at some qualitative research because if co-teaching were to be successful, you're going to want students and teachers to think that it's beneficial, and for the most part they did. The teachers did voice that they needed common planning time when this occurs. They need training. The administrators need to be supportive, things of that nature. They also need to found that it needs to be voluntary. They can't be forced, and they need to be able to pick who they want to teach with. So overall, unfortunately there was a gap in the research. It's for the most part inconclusive. From the studies that are out there, there's no way to prove that teaching or co-teaching alone gives students with disabilities an advantage. And there needs to be more research out there. I recommended in the end of my review, not only does there need to be more research, but a way of doing it. You'd have to have administrators on board. It needs to be voluntary among teachers. and baseline needs to be set. Students need to have their test scores looked at from one grade to the next, not just for 1 year. Start at the level that they're in currently, and compare those original test scores from whether they were in a co-taught or just a pull-out resource room or a general education room. Compare those test scores to the next year's test scores when they're in the co-taught class, and then again add another co-taught class the next year and go back and analyze those scores again. Another thing that would be difficult to do, but I think it'd be necessary, is teachers who need to follow these students from one grade to the other. Their way the teacher effect is thrown out. There's no argument that I had a bad teacher or I had a good teacher. Once again, the research shows that there are some advantages to co-teaching. The students and teachers find it beneficial. However, there's not enough quantitative research out there to prove that it's success on test scores. And we're doing this in our classrooms right now. A lot of schools do, and we need to have the research to support it. Thank you.